All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Volleyball BC Coach Development webinar series. Today is our last episode of the week, and we're really excited to have on Julie Young from the Strathcona Prep Volleyball School and our former national team athlete. Before we get going here, just a couple housekeeping items to keep in mind. So tonight's presentation's format will be a presentation by Julie with a break about halfway at the halfway point to answer some questions. You can use the Q&A function on the Zoom application to ask questions, and there will also be a chat box for which we can just have some discussion and chat there. For those who are unable to attend tonight, we will be broadcasting this on our YouTube channel live, and that will be archived for everyone to take a look at once we're done. So Julie, let's bring you on.
Good to go.
Awesome. All right, well, we can hear you, we can see you.
Perfect.
Take her away.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jay and Volleyball BC for this opportunity to speak and present. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I've been so impressed with the professionalism of coaches within BC and the collaboration amongst all of you. And just you've welcomed me with open arms, and it's been a truly amazing experience. And I just believe that coaching in Canada needs to be community-based, and it has to be for the betterment and the development for the athlete and supporting their journeys along the way. So in saying that, I hope that you're able to take something away from tonight. As an athlete, I always try to take something from a coach or even an assistant coach along the way, whether they're brought in. And same thing when I became a coach, I wanted to take something away from everyone that I had met, and that collaboration can only make you better. So I talk a lot with my hands. So if I'm tight, I'm trying to hold the table. But I prefer to be in a gym, but this is a great opportunity for me to practice being calm. So my journey through sport has really shaped the person and the coach that I am today. The reason that I do or don't do things is a direct reflection on the teammates and coaches that I've worked with. I grew up in Red Deer, Alberta. My mom was a phys ed teacher, and she had me in the gym, and I just fell in love with all sports. So I played basketball, soccer, tennis, badminton, you name it, all growing up. And I just had a love for volleyball. I was always at her practices and playing and against the wall. And I was so fortunate to have played provincial team and then recruited into national team. So I was able to be in that youth and junior pathway while in high school, and I truly learned what my goals were and were able to set them pretty high at a younger age. And then I was recruited to the University of Calgary by Kevin Boyles, and what I really took away from my experience at UFC was how Kevin really fostered a competitive culture where we us as teammates battled against each other day in, day out, and we did it for each other. And so when it came to game time, we were in it to win it together. And I just really appreciated that what he brought. And throughout my years at university, I was playing on our B team. And so I got a taste of what it was like to play at that next level and to compete with some of the best in the country, and just had those role models and something to aspire to. And so when I retired, I went directly to the national team, and just I loved every moment of it. It was extremely difficult, and it has hardened me as a person at sometimes and really, really pushed me to the limits. But I had amazing experiences, able to travel the world, was part of world championships and Pan Am Games. And unlike Charles, I know he was able to meet the Queen, but I got to meet MC Hammer. So I know that's a close second, but it was still pretty cool experiences with those teammates. And then when I played overseas, I was able to adapt to different coaching styles and different athletes, foreign athletes that I played with, all the while not understanding the language. So I was really fortunate to have those experiences, but they really opened my eyes up to having to be spontaneous and adapt to certain situations, like I said. And so when I retired, which was the biggest heartbreak of my life in 2012, we didn't qualify for the Olympics. I was called by Kerry McDonald, and I had moved back to Calgary, and he had asked me if I wanted to be a part of this program called the Volleyball Canada Centre of Excellence. And I thought, I didn't know if I wanted to be a coach or go into coaching at that time. It was pretty fresh. And I thought, what a great opportunity for me to give back to younger athletes. So I was really, really fortunate to have Kerry as one of my first mentors as a coach. And I got to work with Ardo Dwyer and Ian Halliday in that first year. And then they brought Jesse Knight on, and that really opened my eyes to what skill development can be and the science behind everything and the tactical. And I just really fell in love with the skill development side of coaching. And so I was fortunate to have been asked to be an assistant coach in 2016 with our junior national team. And then that same summer, I was brought on by Sandra Lamb with Mount Royal University. And she truly embodies and embraces that growth mindset that Charles was talking about on Wednesday. And she loves to learn and is always researching ways to make her team better. And I think she's done an amazing job. And I just think of how they've done this year, and it's disappointing that they didn't get to go to nationals because of COVID, but I truly think that she's done amazing work with that program, and she really, really challenged me as a coach and made me a lot better. So little shout out to her there. And then about a year and a half ago, Jesse Knight lives out on the island where I am now, said we were a go to start a sports school to really help rural athletes be exposed to a professional coaching style, and like a holistic athlete, long-term athlete development plan. And we have athletes from all over that have come in, and we have 3 different club teams in this area, and we just put them on those teams. And we really focus on developing them for that next level. And I really, really love that NET program. And I think that's exactly where we need to be going, because I just want our athletes to succeed, and I just don't want them to have the same heartbreak that I had. I want them to go to the Olympics, and I truly believe that if we have these pathways in place, they'll be able to be way more successful. I also sit on the board of directors of Volleyball Canada, and I'm the athlete director, so I'm the liaison between all 3 disciplines, sitting beach and indoor teams. So just making sure that their voices are heard on that board. And so that's been really fun for me. My passion is definitely skill development, and I've been fortunate enough to have coached at high levels, but I love coaching the grassroots, and I just want to coach those athletes during their early years of development and be a guide towards high performance. And I just really hope that I can empower young female athletes along the way and give them advice and tools that they need later in life. And I'm just fortunate to have this opportunity to connect with young athletes, and I'm just so proud of their journeys. So there are so many directions that I could have gone tonight. I chose to focus this presentation on fostering a high performance mentality at a grassroots level, and how to bring out the best in my athletes, and when they're first exposed to a competitive environment. So I thought, I don't know if anyone's been watching the Last Dance documentaries. I just am a huge fan of Michael Jordan, but it was perfect timing this week because he talks about push and pushing his teammates. And that's exactly what we have to do as high performance coaches. We have to push our athletes when they do not want to be pushed, and challenge our athletes when they don't want to be challenged. But if we're dealing with younger athletes, how do we do that without crushing their souls? Because they truly think that sometimes. What is high performance? Really, it's just a really general definition of, it's an environment where we will be better, stronger, and more efficient than our competition. And Charles touched base on this growth mindset. And I think that I had asked an athlete, a U17 athlete, she had played on the junior national team last summer, what does growth mindset mean to you? And she just said, growing your mind. So we really do have to explain a lot of things to these athletes. And so I approach this growth mindset in 4 different ways: being mindful, understanding the process of their development. Athlete autonomy, I'm a huge advocate of athlete autonomy, and Mike touched base on this on Wednesday. And the ability to go internal, to understand what their bodies are doing so that they can learn to self-correct. And this will just help your athletes be more creative. Being mentally tough, being resilient in tough moments in games and practices, and the ability to push through and have the confidence to overcome any obstacle. And what a great life skill to have. And then sacrifice, which is pretty self-explanatory. Athletes just have to give up a lot from experience. You have to give up family time, time with friends, you name it. And we have to do that as coaches too. If we want to be that high performance mindset, we have to sacrifice some of our time as well. And I chose this picture of Sarah and Melissa. I was fortunate enough to have played with Sarah Pavin since I was 16, and she truly made me a better athlete because of how she pushed me. And I really loved an article that she wrote this year, and I actually sent it out to my athletes. That's how you can be a high performance athlete but an introvert. So she brought it every single day, and she was able to push and want to be better, and really embodied what it truly means to be like a whole athlete. And I really admire her, and I'm so proud of where she is, and we can learn a lot from her for sure. So this presentation, I want to touch on 5 different areas. So that whole athlete LTAD model, where great high performance programs have pillars. Our intro to high performance, so cultivating that growth mindset, approach to our errors. They're inevitable. Volleyball is a game of errors, so how do we deal with them? High performance and parents, so introducing parents to that high performance mindset and team. And then sport for life, so life after competitive volleyball. So the whole athlete model, there's many pillars that encompass this, what a high performance program will be. And so we have our technical, tactical, that on-court training, our strength training, sports psychology, and I love the word mindful. And I really think that we can use our gyms, even if we don't have access to sports psych, we can use tools such as journals, and I love the Daily Athletes Journal. I think Derek's done a wonderful job with that, and debriefing after practice can really help that reflection side, and it's a great way to support local. And they can be a part of that learning process. Nutrition and treatment of injuries, so physio, athletic therapy, chiro, acupuncture, massage. We have to be taking care of our injuries. And then that recovery side, so talking a lot about sleep and yoga and ice baths. And I understand that some of us don't have access to all of these things, but if we can go out and connect with club directors and go out and build relationships with different physio people or physio clinics in the area, massage therapists, and going back to that, the nutrition, same thing, we can find great sources for nutritionists. And then with yoga, I am a certified yoga instructor, and I found that yoga changed my career, and I was less achy and painy. So when I was at Mount Royal, I designed a lot of yoga series based around our hips, opening up our hips and our calves and our shoulders. So that was really fun for me, and it's a passion of mine for sure. So that embodies that whole athlete model. And I really truly think that, especially at a younger age, we are visible to our athletes, and we need to practice what we preach. So we can be role models. We can stretch with them after practice while journaling with them. And even if we're at tournaments, they can see us eating properly and talking about great sleep habits. And I think it's truly, truly important for them to visibly see us do it, and we can be those role models. So an introduction to a high performance mindset. We can expose high performance mindset to athletes at any age. If we look at soccer, hockey, and basketball across our country, they're able to play at a really young age, and they push them at an HP level. obviously our sport is very, very skill oriented, and it's hard for little kids to get that, but I just love smash ball, and I think it's a great opportunity to expose younger kids to our sport at the elementary level. The selection process. Athletes and parents have to understand, especially when you're first starting to introduce what high performance means, they have to understand what it means. And so you can create expectations. So my expectations versus a team expectations, demanding excellence. I demand excellence in my gym, that they always work hard, are wanting to improve. And I love a competitive cauldron, so we can put all of our athletes' names down and we just track it throughout the season, and keeping track of points so that competitive culture starts to evolve. Even just tennis matches, even just little warm-up games, just trying to get them to want to compete and want to win and want to be able to tick that off. And then I said team expectations, so having your team decide what happens if said player wears the wrong t-shirt to practice, forgets knee pads. Creating that is a really neat way to keep all athletes accountable. So when we are actually choosing our athletes, especially at the younger ages and even into older ages, when I say older ages, it's more university and U18 levels, but I obviously we want to pick our most skilled athletes, but we also have to look at those athletes that are really coachable. Are they able to make changes? Are they able to listen, and are they good listeners? Are they really good teammates? I think that's a really important thing, in seeing if we can get more skill out of them. Obviously, if we're talking junior and youth national team, we are looking for those best athletes that will take it to the next level. When we're teaching push and compete, these are core principles of team culture, and we have to create relationships with our athletes where we form a level of respect on each end. And Shane talked about this on Monday, and I truly believe that you have to have that mutual respect. And I know that Mike on Wednesday talked about that nowadays athlete. Athletes need to know the whys of everything. Why am I being pushed like this? Why aren't I playing? Why did I get subbed? Why do we have to do strength? And the list goes on, and it seems like we shouldn't have to tell them, but they do need to know, and that's just the reality, and we just have to accept that and move on. And then we can have themes in our practice to help push. And I was talking with Ryan Hofer back in the fall, and I loved this mentality that he had in his team. It was called, or he said to them, you can do difficult things. And so when you're telling your athletes they can do difficult things, this will help inspire them, and it will help them build confidence, so that if you have a really hard practice and you keep saying you can do this, this is difficult, you have to explain that to them. And whether or not they're learning a new skill, a new system, they'll be able to survive. And like, hardships will happen, substitutions will happen, slumps happen. It's life, and it's great preparation for them for sports, playing that next level, and even life in general. I had to remind some of my athletes this year and last year and even university that when you're coaching them and when you're pushing at them, you want them to get better. This is not an attack on them as people or on personalities or on their character. You are challenging them to get better. And this is my job, to bring out the best in you. And even at that higher level, I can't even throw out blanket statements sometimes, because they always think that it's them. And so that's been a really a challenge for me, and it's been a really interesting learning curve. And when they understand that it's really not about them and about their personality, but about their development, you will see a huge shift in their confidence, and the result is that they will just fly. It's so great to see. So another way that we can teach that push, and especially I think we can teach compete, is having that observation approach. So having athletes actually come in and watching an older team play. So instead of having them watch skills, you can have them watch interaction. So watching athletes interact with their coaches. How do they respond to feedback? how do they respond to errors? So having them and task them with that so that they have their focus on something other than just watching the ball. And then you could also obviously task them on, okay, what's their eye sequencing and making sure that they're watching that. But it's also a really great opportunity for those older athletes at the end of practice to talk to the younger ones and come together, because those older athletes were once there, and this will also help their confidence. And you can help as a coach really help facilitate that. So designing practices to include pressure and to establish a compete mindset. They may not like you after, but that's okay. If you've established that mutual respect, then the why and the why, then they'll understand and respond to it. You can be that instigator where you create the pressure scenarios where the athletes have to come together and complete difficult tasks in order to succeed. So I can give you an example. I never actually thought I'd have to explain this in my life, but it's been a really, like I said, great learning opportunity for the grassroots, where there were too many balls that were dropping in practice without people going for it or even saying anything. And I said, okay, I don't like punishment, so I won't make my athletes run, but planks were necessary that day. And so I said, if the ball drops, we're doing plank. So ball drops, and I have about 2 or 3 athletes that are standing around watching, and what are we watching? Well, I didn't make that error. And so I had to explain to them, well, if you make an error, does only you lose an error as your team? So you have to teach them what that team mentality is, and you're all in it together, and you all have to push through things together, and it's going to be difficult. But I said, you have to explain it to them. Some drills that I really love at the end of practice are making short little games that are super full of pressure, where you have even 24, 23, team with 23 is serving. That huge pressure, that happens quite a bit, and giving them the confidence to do so and encouragement, and even having 20-20, 22-22, all of those little games at the end where the little things matter are extremely important. And then you can also have server versus passers, three perfect 3s or 4s before 1s or 0s, servers serving 1s or 0s. So I think those are really great challenges for athletes to have. And you can also add those to the cauldron points. They get really excited, and it's really fun to see. Coaching energy. So going back to that establishment of your expectations, you have to demand that atmosphere that just encompasses that hard work, improvement, and excellence. And I love that hurricane drill where you come in and you're running the show and bringing your energy and working hard yourself. And they're going to want to work hard. And if you're excited, then they get excited, and they're going to want to make changes. And I just think that creating that energetic atmosphere with all of that positive talk and encouragement will really help foster a safe learning area.
Were you ready for a little break here, Julie? Answer some questions?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's do it. I'm just going to pull up the poll here to get some questions flying, and then yeah, we'll get right into it here. So you mentioned multi-sport participation at the beginning part of your presentation, where you yourself were a multi-sport athlete, and that was something that was really contributed to your long-term success and growth. And so how can coaches support this, right? Like, obviously, we want to train athletes, and we want to train our teams so they can develop and get better, and we always think maybe more, right? And we're talking about the whole athlete development. But how can we balance what we're doing on the volleyball court with athletes' other busy schedule?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I had an instance this year where an athlete had basketball provincials, and we had a super series. In my opinion, basketball provincials are something that athlete has worked up to, and I feel that her development and her experience there is more important than day one of a super series. And I also talked with her coach, and we had to balance our practice schedules. And I think that is huge, is if you're able to connect with their coaches and explain maybe what cycle you're in and what you're planning for the week, you'll be able to balance it quite nicely. Now, as we get older, that athlete has to choose, because you can't do both, especially if we're talking about that whole athlete approach. You don't have time if you're going to physio, if we're doing yoga, if we are going to physio. It's really hard to balance a lot of competitive sport that way. And sometimes school sport is fine. Like if they're playing after school soccer earlier on, they'll be able to make your practices in the evening. But I know that a lot of coaches also worry about injury. So you just have to communicate.
Awesome. At what point can you really start talking about this idea of having a high performance mindset, or really introducing this concept of, developing a whole athlete and really focusing time, energy into one sport to seeing how good you can get at it?
Mm-hmm. So when I played pro overseas, they had sports schools and they had athletes that were grade 4. So I think they were more multi-sport. But I really do think that around 13, 14, you can start to implement that high performance mentality, because you can start having those athletes weight train, maybe body weight, but having and even like having an athletic therapist on hand if they get injured. I think it's just part of the education piece, is letting them know that this is something to aspire to and this can be a pathway. So I don't really think there is necessarily an age. But if I were to say something, I guess it would be like 13, 14, but it just depends on the athlete, really.
Yeah, totally. So with the whole athlete development, we're hearing from coaches that, they don't have time to focus on all these different areas. And so if you had to maybe start with one area to start incorporating some of the off-court development, which area would that be? And let's keep using the example of a 14U or a 16U team.
At 16U, I think that the sports psych is something that you can incorporate into your practice. I don't think that we give this enough time. Athletes tend to reflect quite a bit. And if we're able to write it down, they'll be able to get those feelings and ideas out. And if they're able to, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I love the idea of 3 really good things that you've done, and then 2 things that you want to work on, whether it's more high fives or I want to be a better teammate tomorrow. I think that we can, if you don't have access to the strength training and all the others, I really do think that sports psych is somewhere that we can help our athletes, and we need to focus on it a lot more than what we do.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, for you, is that you researching some different, maybe activities or ways to incorporate that into practice, or are you going out to external coaches with that experience, or we're looking for other people in the community to help you with that area?
I would definitely look to our community too. Obviously, I'm not a sports psych, so I don't have that background. But like I said, we have tools. That Daily Athlete Journal is a great tool to use that really helps with our athletes. But we can, and the same thing with, like, we're not nutritionists as coaches. We are not athletic therapists. So it's hard to get them to, or it's hard to have those, I guess, to present to our athletes if we're not that itself. So for me, it was the sports psych is something that I could bring a little bit more just by resources that are out there.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to jump back a little bit back to your journey. After you retired and you got that phone call from Carrie, how, maybe what happened in that kind of recruitment process to get you interested into coaching? And for those on the call who are with clubs and are involved with creating or recruiting coaches for their club, what are some things they can do to help recruit that newly retired 18U athlete that isn't playing post-secondary volleyball? Or maybe it's that athlete that was a part of the club and played 4 years of post-secondary and now there's maybe an opportunity for them to come and give back. What are some tips there?
So I'll talk about that in the Sport for Life, but I truly think if you give an athlete a really great experience in our sport, they'll want to continue to play and be involved. If they don't have a good experience, if if they feel like they're just shoved to the curb, they may choose another sport and quit. One thing that it might have been ingrained in me. I just wanted to give back. I don't know what my life would be without volleyball. And I just also, this is, I guess, maybe more of a personal journey. I don't want athletes to continue to have the heartbreak of not making the Olympics. I wanted to be able to be one of those people in the trenches that allowed them and gave them some tools, whether it's skill or even just confidence, to be able to potentially play at that next level and hope that they can make the Olympics someday.
Awesome. Okay, back to introducing that high performance mindset with athletes that we're coaching. Where do you start? What's the first area to start? And maybe speaking to some of Charles's presentation with planning your season, how does that kind of get incorporated into that plan you're creating before the season starts?
I think if you're having a sit down and you have all your systems in a handbook, I think you can create your expectations from there and go, if you're going to get pushed and challenged. And like I said, those have to be core principles of your culture, but they're for the better, and you will be better for your team because of it. And I think it has to be done at the beginning of the season to just have those principles and, establish what you want to achieve and how you're going to do it.
So that looks like maybe like a players meeting, or how does that kind of work?
Oh, totally. So you want to do that in a players, like if you're doing or coaching a higher like university versus U15, you can do it to begin with. That's what I did with all of my teams throughout. This is how it's going to go, and even throughout the year, just having check-ins and individual meetings going, how's it going? Remember when we talked about this at the beginning of the year?
Yeah.
It's super important to have those one-on-ones so that they can, and having those relationships where they trust you to tell you.
Yeah. Awesome. So you mentioned the competitive cauldron, and with that, can you explain to us how you set that up, and is that being used to determine playing time at that Super Series, or is it to just develop that competitive environment in the practice?
Totally, it's a competitive tool for me, and I'll just set that up in a Google Doc, and then that way I have it on my phone, and I can just click in and whoever won that day. And to be honest, I find some of your harder competitors are the ones that are winning those, but sometimes it's the silent killers that you're quite surprised with, and it's just basically for the team. You can't base wins off of, there's just so many variables that happen, especially earlier on. You can't base that off of playing time.
Yeah, awesome. Where do you start, or what do you do if there's athletes that aren't naturally outwardly competitive? What does that look like, and where do you start to kind of explore how they can maybe buy into this kind of competitive environment a bit more or differently?
Again, so at a younger age, it's a lot of that initial teaching how to push, kind of explaining that if you want to get better, you're gonna have to be a little bit more ferocious. And that doesn't mean I need to be more vocal and I need to be saying all these things, but there needs to be a will to win. And if you explain that to begin with, then I know that you'll bring out a lot more in that athlete. But then again, if you might not have an athlete that has that in them, and that's okay. And I think if you're able to recognize that, if you not just give up on them, obviously, but just being like, hey, well, this isn't one of those athletes. I might be a filler athlete, especially at the younger ages, might just be a filler athlete, because that's where we first foster that competitiveness. Is you'll be able to tell those athletes at 14, 15, right? So, and if we can get that out of them at a younger age and teach them to be a little bit more ferocious and compete, going to battle in practices and not just in games, I just think that you'll be able to create like I said, a competitive environment, but then that'll transfer going up the pipeline.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's good for now. Let's keep it going.
Perfect. So growth mindset and our approach to errors. Like I said before, errors are just inevitable in our sport. And I was once coaching a 5-set match at Mount Royal, and we won, but we had 65 errors. And that's not okay in my books, but you know, this it just kind of goes to show you can win matches and still be making a lot of errors, but it's our approach to them. So without errors, there will be no growth. And so we have to encourage that autonomous learning again, asking how that felt when they make an error. And athletes need to feel that change and teach them to be more in tune with their bodies, rather than giving them that constant feedback of, oh, you did this, oh, you did that, because then they'll just continue to look at you every time they make an error, rather than going internal and being like, okay, if I can see myself doing it correctly, then they'll make the change a lot quicker. And then Carol touched base on this last night, but I truly believe that growth at a younger age will be slow at times, and there will be a lot of errors, but we have to be patient as coaches, and we can't sacrifice long-term development for that short-term win. And so I move on to love and fear. So I believe that athletes work in these two realms, where we need to foster relationships with our athletes, where we create atmospheres where they feel safe to play free and their best, and they can make errors. And this will just create confidence and motivate the athletes to get better for their teammates and their team. In fear, as we all know, a lot of these athletes are riddled with anxiety. They may be scared to make any type of error. And so when it comes to sport, there's just this added pressure. So we as coaches now have to start to think, am I yelling at them and just belittling them? Is that a way to bring out the best in them? And it just kind of makes them give up. And like I said, we know these athletes, they tend to take it personally and almost like it's abusive and that coach hates me. So we have to explain kind of why we're doing it and why we're pushing them, and we want them to get better. But there is that balance between that love and fear. And I love this quote by Connor Beaton. If it excites you and scares you at the same time, it might be a good thing to try. So I always use this. I remember when I was younger, I was watching this athlete come and approach and swing down the line and still look as if they're going cross court. And I was terrified to do it, but I was so excited to try. And I think that we can truly foster that growth mindset, and if we allow our athletes to make errors based on that, we'll have a lot more success. But then again, if they feel too comfortable to make errors, they'll just make careless errors, and that's not acceptable either. So we have to find that balance. And I love using and having positive and negative errors in my practice. So like I said, if we were working on that crossbody shot and we're over rotating a little bit, that's okay. That's near misses. Same thing if in my gym, we serve out of position 1 and 5, and if we're working on a stellar float and I really want that ball to wiggle and duck and dive going cross court and it just floats 2 inches out the sideline, I'm okay with that. Same thing if we're working on that drive serve. Athletes that have been working really hard with their platforms, just missing it, making the wrong reads, I'm okay with those errors. But we'll still be, as long as we're able to give them the cues, and they'll be able to make those positive changes in their minds. Negative errors in my gym are definitely serving from 6. That's the easiest pass to make. Your angle, your platform is presented no matter where they're serving from. So it's such an easy one. So for me, and if they miss, well, that's even more. So those negative errors are pretty evident. And I think that even being goofy footed, that's a huge no-no in my gym, because it just restricts their torque and their ability to swing properly. I had an athlete where I wouldn't let her score points. She was very successful, but I didn't let those points score in practice if she was goofy footed. So it's really important to be able to teach those athletes, to teach them some good errors that are okay and they can get over and they'll be able to move on from, and then those errors that are just not acceptable. And I loved what Ryan said last night too about those redos and practices. Those are so important. Yes, they may be a block rep, but it just helps them with that autonomy and that self-teaching as well, so they can do it again and be able to rip on a ball or serve that ball again, or yes, I can pass that ball again. So I think those are really important. That's a really important skill and thing to add into your practices. Video feedback and analysis is a very interesting one. And I know Mike talked about this on Wednesday, but I've had a very different experience with younger female athletes. I had an athlete in Calgary that would not watch video of herself because she refused to see herself doing it wrong. So we had to, it took me a couple weeks. There was lots of tears, if you can believe it. We deal with a lot of that on the women's side. Half the time you have to teach them to watch the skill that they're trying to carry out, because they're so focused on how they look. I even had a Zoom meeting with some of my athletes, and they were talking about how to turn the filter on. So that social media side has really done no good for our female athletes, and I'm sure that it's on the men's side as well, but that's just something that I really noticed. But having these video feedback and analysis will just help our errors, or help those errors. Having that phone right away, ready at the ready. Coach's Eye is my favorite tool to use. I have it on an iPad and also on my phone, and that's really, it's been a really great thing for younger athletes to see them doing it, because when they may feel that they're doing it right, but when they see it, they're like, oh, I get it now. And you just have to teach them to be able to watch themselves and give them the cues, so that when they're watching video, they're not just watching the ball, they're watching themselves do it. And then I love coaching mistakes. So I will be the first to admit when I'm wrong. That's why I included this picture. It's me obviously making a mistake, too far back on my heels, didn't stick my nose into the ball, and probably me going, no, but my platform's too high anyway. So there was no way I was going to make that dig. And I think that humanizes you, being able to admit when you're wrong, or when you made a little mistake. It's not a big deal. And that will, I think, give you more respect from your athletes, and rather than them always looking at you as this totalitarian style dictator coach in their eyes, because you're the one that gets to decide if they play or not. But it's been really, really great for me and my ego to just be silly almost, and just be like, whoops, yeah, my fault, move on, next. So it's been good for that. Guiding parents of high performance athletes. And I put a picture of my parents on here because I feel that they did a really good job with me growing up. And I use them as examples in my parent meetings now. My mom obviously was a volleyball coach, and she supported me all the way. Maybe a little too critical at times. Sometimes I had my best games, and she'd be like, oh, you missed that dig. And always bring that. But I always strove to be better. I knew it came from a place of love, but but anytime I would have an issue, she'd be very open and saying, you need to go talk to your coach. She never stepped in, even though she was probably one of those parents that knew a little bit more, but no matter what, she never stepped in. My dad could not tell you the difference between a double hit and a carry. He was one of those parents that was clapping and was clap for both teams, clap for great plays. So I think that's really important, to have those preseason parent meetings and give those examples of you're there for support, and you expect that your athletes or their children are going to come in and play their best, but that doesn't determine playing time at all. And that you're not basing your decisions solely on the stats. It's also what they're bringing to practice. Are they being good teammates? Are they late all the time? You know, some of these things do play into it. And I think it's really important to make sure you're keeping those lines of communication open. And again, I think it's really important to encourage your parents, or the parents that you're working with, to tell the athletes if there's an issue, to advocate for themselves and come talk to you. And like I said before, if you're able to foster that positive relationship, they will feel confident to come and talk to you. Another thing, we can educate parents. They can be a resource with those pillars and that whole athlete mentality. You can make sure that they understand that they have to feed their kids nutritious meals, regulate sleep. And one thing that I think that parents need to know at a younger age, like 12, 13, 14, is time management. And they can help their kids understand what it's like to be a student athlete, that you have to make sure you're finished your homework and managing your time, because if you go to university, if you miss your practice times because of homework, that is unacceptable. Or if you didn't manage your time well enough and you have 2 midterms tomorrow and I'm too stressed out to go to practice, that's not happening. And it's just a really great life skill, and you have to make sure that you're communicating constantly with those parents to help foster that high performance mentality. And again, car ride debriefs. I have meetings with parents. You are there to support. I keep saying that word, support, support, support. You're not there to criticize the coaches. They're doing their best. You're not there to criticize any other parent out there. We're not criticizing other athletes. You're there for support. And I hope that they would steer conversations into more productive ways. Well, how can we work harder tomorrow? Or what could we do different tomorrow? So helping them with the proper vocab to talk to their athletes. And then I miss the parent conduct, but we have to teach our parents that it's no yelling at the ref, like no talking about other kids in the stands. There's no place for that, even in high performance. And I think if you're able to teach that to the parents, because you are teaching it to the parents and bringing it up at a younger age, that and if you bring it up every year, it won't be an issue. Sport for life. So this is what we hope. I talked about this earlier on. We hope that athletes have a great experience while they're playing, so that they'll want to come back and coach, ref, volunteer. And it's also after your competitive career, but also that athlete that has that drive and is that gritty athlete, and you really want the best for them, but they just don't have the skill to go post-secondary. And that's okay. And as long as we are able to let them know that, and let them encourage them to go to smash ball sessions, and maybe they can develop a love for coaching there. And I wanted to bring up smash ball too, because this is a great tool for your athletes, whether they're 14 to university. Having athletes come back and teach elementary school athletes, it's quite the experience. If you haven't worked with 8-year-olds playing volleyball before, game changer. You're telling kids to freeze, it's just management, but they're also actually learning quite a bit. So it's really great for your athletes to kind of take what you've been saying to them, and then seeing them teach it is a really cool experience, and the kids just love it. So I just really encourage sport for life, and keeping that high, and they can even foster that high performance mindset through that. So I think what I've really learned is, by a lot of how I've learned this, is coaching collaboration. Some of the podcasts that I really like are the Coach Your Brains Out is a really great one. I love the Gold Medal Square Mentality as well. And that Canada West TV, FIVB TV. I linked that Daily Athlete Journal because I think it's a great tool. And then again, that Sarah Pavin letter to herself has been a really great tool to send out to other athletes, especially those internal and more, the ones that aren't that eccentric, that always eager, kind of out there athletes. This is a really great letter if you haven't already read it. Yeah, so I'm always open. I know we're gonna have a little chat after, but open for discussion. I think that's how we learn best as coaches. And like I said, I feel so welcome in BC, and I think all the coaches that I have been working with and have seen at tournaments, I've learned so much from you, and I think that we can all learn from each other to really make volleyball in BC and in Canada better. So thank you for tuning in on a Friday night at 7, and hopefully I didn't yammer, but hopefully you took something out of this. So I just really appreciate you tuning in, and thanks, Jay.
Awesome. No yammering whatsoever. You're good. All right, let's get another poll going, and let's see what we got for questions. So we've got a couple questions there that are going to be in the poll. You can vote on your favorites, and we'll start with those. And if anything else comes up in the next little while here, please use the Q&A function. The one that just comes to mind for me that we just recently talked about was the sport for life. And I think that one thing, as working with Volleyball BC and other administrators in our sport, is how can we get more young females into coaching, right? And what can we do to really help support that transitionary period, and maybe particularly between post-secondary volleyball and club volleyball. So, I mean, in your experience, what are some strategies that have worked, or what do you know from yourself and maybe some of other teammates you've played with that have really helped that transition period to have people involved?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just having, especially involving women, having those conversations of inclusion and even letting them know that you will be great role models for these young women. And if you've been even at a club level, they will respect you more. And it's one of those things I've always said, it's very hard to coach women sometimes because the emotions are so different than what they are of a male's. And I just really encourage a lot of female coaches to coach, because they'll understand and be able to relate to their players more, and they'll be able to relate. And I truly think that women need more role models out there. And I think there are a lot of amazing coaches here in BC. So it's just, like I said, having those conversations with those coaches and encouraging them, and even bringing out younger athletes. And like I said, Smash Ball is a great opportunity, encouraging those athletes to come to train and play and help coach with you, and exposing them to those scenarios and those situations at an earlier age, and it becomes fun for them.
Awesome. How do you balance the fine line between pushing an athlete and really challenging them, and not maybe being demeaning or bullying?
Well, like I said, you just have to make sure that you explain why you're doing it. And it's also the vocab that you're doing it and the tone.
Mhm.
Like, if an athlete isn't working hard enough, I'm not just gonna pick them apart and say, you're being horrible today. How dare you? You can't say that to an athlete. You can either bring them aside and be like, something's wrong with you today. I need you to find another level in you. And I'm doing this because I know that you can do it. That's what we need to do to some of our athletes, because they don't respond well to it. And like I said earlier, they get such anxiety around not being good enough, and especially women, that you sometimes have to really have that individual conversation and then put them back in the drill. So yeah.
Awesome. How would you work with an athlete that's getting really defensive with receiving constructive feedback? What are some strategies we can use?
Video them. No. Video is a great tool. Yeah, some athletes, you just have to teach them that like I said, we're only doing this so that you are getting better. And right now you are preventing yourself from getting better. Using video, and then having them also encourage them to use journals, reflecting on their great things and going over that, and having individual meetings with those athletes, with all athletes, but you can really touch base on that in one-on-ones and going, how do you think we're doing with that coachability? Are you challenging yourselves to get better? And I think sometimes we get those stubborn players on our team that tend to be the best, but will not make the little change because it's working for them. And why would I have to make that change if it's already working? And really showing them even next level video. So U-Sport video, FIVB. Well, if you want to get to here, you're going to have to make a change. And so I think it's important, a tool, video.
Awesome. So I just graduated club volleyball. I'm 19 years old, and I'm going to be helping out with my local club. I'm a coach. I'm a new coach, and I've just had tryouts, and we're about to go to our first tournament, and I've got a major issue with a parent, or a parent is being extremely challenging. What are some different tips or tricks or suggestions for that younger coach dealing with a parent of an athlete that might be, the same age as their parents.
Yeah, and that's really difficult too, because there's that age gap. I would encourage them to reach out to their club director and make that issue aware. Club directors having that teamwork, and that's why they're there, is to help you solve and help you work through those situations. And there's no better time than when you're young to have those difficult conversations. So one of those things, you've got to be brave, you've got to speak up, and then, you know what, if it continues to get worse and worse and worse, then unfortunately that kid's the one that's going to suffer, and you just have to let that kid go and have those conversations with the parents. But yeah, it's tough convos, but you have to have them, and they'll only help you later in life as well.
Totally. I think we can all kind of think back of that last tough conversation we've had with a parent. So definitely. Okay. Speaking of parents, what are some ways that coaches can go build trust with parents of athletes in their club to help support this concept of a high performing athlete or a high performance mindset?
Like I said, parent meetings, even having one-on-one parent meetings are really important. I don't want to have to say you have to prove yourself, but if you have your season plan and present that to the parents, that'll just show how professional you are. And I think that's really important tool to use. And even just having, if you need to have, especially with younger kids, you might have to have more parent meetings. Yep. And I will have parent meetings without the athletes, because half the time you're in meetings and the parents doing the talking for the athletes, but the reality is they still need to be involved, because they are little boys and girls at a younger age. They need to be involved. And when we get to U17, U18, then they have to start advocating for themselves, and they'll be driving, but parents are there, and sometimes they'll be watching practice. So you have to build those relationships so that they can trust you. And if they see you at even a more humanized level, they'll be able to kind of not see you as their equal, but they'll just have a better relationship with you for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about it. We'll have one more question here, and we'll put you a little bit on the spot, but what would be the number one takeaway of tonight's presentation? Like the number one kind of actionable kind of message you gave us in terms of how coaches can foster a high performance mindset?
So I would say, especially at the younger ages, when you're starting to introduce it, like I said, with the push, you've got to teach them what it means and why you're doing it. And I think if you continue to do that push and why, you won't have to worry about that when they get to U17, U18, because they understand why coaches are doing it. And it's, like I said, not an attack on them as people. It's you want them to succeed. So, yeah.
Well, awesome, Julia. This was great. I really enjoyed the presentation and the conversation, and I know our coaches who were paying attention got a lot out of it. So thank you very, very much. Yeah, we definitely gave you the hard time slot at 7 p.m. on a long weekend, but yeah, we definitely had a good group of coaches here who were listening in. So thanks again for everyone who tuned in this week and tonight. Thank you so much. I think we had quite a few coaches that were able to tune in. I think last time I checked, we're at about 150 unique coaches who tuned in for a majority of one webinar at least. So yeah, really excited to see all the great feedback we got and the engagement. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Have a great long weekend. Stay safe, and I'm sure we'll be talking to everyone soon about how we're returning to playing volleyball soon enough. So stay safe, everyone.
Awesome. Stay safe. Bye.